Hi, I'm Tom Doctorow, and welcome back to the ITV Marketing and Advertising section. Today I have the pleasure of having Michiel Hofstee, who is currently the Managing Director of JWT Shanghai. Obviously, I work very closely with Michiel. Welcome to ITV.
Thank you, Tom.
You're very welcome. Let's just start very broadly about your background and why you came to China.
I've been in advertising for 20 years. And
you don't look that old.
But I'm still fascinated about the fact that advertising can shape preference and behavior of consumers and actually contribute to the business success of our clients. And that's what gets me up every morning.
Yeah, but that's why you like advertising. Well, two questions, sub-questions. One is, what do you mean by advertising exactly? I mean, in today's new era of consumer empowerment, I take it advertising is not just a television commercial. What do you perceive as advertising?
Correct, but the ability to shape preference and behavior is limited in mature countries. So the opportunity of being involved in major projects in China was one of the reasons for coming here. In terms of communications, I believe it's advertising, the definition for me of advertising is the total palette of activities that's at our ability to implement these strategies.
So for example, when you say palette of activities, can you just be a little bit more specific on the colors on that palette?
Obviously, there are traditional media that are big for our agency, like TV, like outdoor, print, and radio. But in today's environment where consumer behavior in the media landscape is completely different, there's a need to understand and to have these other colors in the palette at your disposal to truly connect with consumers.
So which are, do you think, the most important non-traditional disciplines that are required for building brand loyalty in China?
I think each color can be used for each objective, but digital obviously is critical in China, as well as I think field marketing and in-store promotions to cover both ends of the spectrum, building the brand but also drive it at the sales environment.
Let's start with the interruption, but you say digital. What specifically do you mean by digital, and why is digital so important for Chinese people, or Chinese brands, building brands in China?
The amount of people behaving on the internet is huge. It's the biggest in the whole world in absolute numbers. Percentages obviously follow the penetration of computers in China. But the amount of time Chinese people spend in the different areas in the digital world is huge, and you need to be there. It's impossible these days for brands to attract people completely to where they are communicating. I think for brands it's important to be at places where consumers behave. And if you look at the behavioral patterns in the digital world in China, then obviously they differ a lot from the rest of the world. And understanding that and advising our brands to be there in the right environment will truly help build these brands.
Do you, suspect that Chinese people engage with digital media in a different way than Western ones do, or is it more or less the same everywhere?
No, it's completely different.
How so?
Take a few data, for example. In a Western environment, 80% of each internet activity starts with search. In China, that's I think less than 20%.
Really?
In China, digital activities start with chatting, so MSN and QQ are both very hot, or with gaming. So those two together form, I believe, almost 70% of the ways consumers start to use the internet.
What does that mean about Chinese people? I mean, the fact that they're starting, I wasn't aware of those statistics, but the fact that they're forming communities as soon as they get onto the internet.
Exactly. I think it's an opportunity to reach out with a broader group of people that have similar interests, and gaming, which obviously has been very big in China, now allows to play interactively through the internet with competitors all around the world.
So the fact that digital is truly interactive, it affords, I hear you saying, a much deeper degree of engagement, participation with a brand, so you can actually dive into a creative proposition. Is that a fair point? Or
yeah, that's completely right. I mean, these days you don't want to develop a communications anymore that's just sending out a message. It's crucial that consumers are almost actively seeking for your information because they need to be interested in it to spend time with it, and that allows the fact that it needs interaction is a critical point to that.
That sounds like you're saying that television advertising is becoming less and less important in China. True or false?
False. Television advertising. I think we shouldn't talk about television advertising anymore. I think we should talk about film. Film will be increasingly important to convey the position of a brand or the launch of a product.
Excuse me.
Television advertising, specifically in China, will be hugely important to portray the size and the bigness of a brand and to win the trust from their customer audience.
But you said something very interesting, the distinction between a television ad and film. Can you be a little bit more specific in what you mean by that?
Well, till not so long ago, there were only 2 channels to air film that was on the television or in a cinema. With the changing landscape, there's much broader opportunities in getting moving pictures and sound to consumers. Look at China, apart from TV, at the whole in-focus network to allow to connect with consumers in office areas and elevators is a massive channel for brands in China to connect, for example, with white-collar workers.
And what about film on the internet? Is that also another channel?
Well, look at the Baidu and Yokus of this world and the YouTubes. These are still the most popular types of sites to go to for people to not just watch but also upload film. So film will appear in different shapes and forms tailored to the channel, but it will be one of the critical parts of getting communication across.
So film is capable in ways that other media may not be of forging, creating, crafting a very clear brand message.
Correct.
And you're also suggesting vividly, that consumers actually can't just be exposed to it, they need to have engagement with it.
Yeah, but that doesn't necessarily have to go through film. That can be through any type of channel.
Do you think that you are going to have a lot of money being made on the internet in terms of advertising, or do you still consider it a relatively constipated medium right here? Because I've heard that, relative to the amount of internet penetration there, the actual percentage of revenue that advertising agencies are making from online advertising communications is relatively low. Actually, I've heard it's in the low single digits. How would you hypothesize that there can be so much internet there, so much digital fascination with the new generation, but still people aren't making huge amounts of money yet with that in China? Do you think that's going to change, or is that something that's fundamental to limitations of the market?
I think that will change in the future. For me, there's 2 elements to your question. I think the first one is that it's still a relatively young medium, and you will see new opportunities in terms of how to advertise in the online world pop up every day. The way people are behaving on the internet and consuming information is something that needs to be monitored very closely to allow for the right message on the internet to be open to this type of communications. And once there's no silver bullet yet, and it needs time and experimentation, literally trial and error, to find ways of shaping communication on the internet, which is commercially driven, in a way that consumers are open to interact with it. I think a lot of communication on the internet right now is kind of done in a billboarding type of way. And this kind of passive way of consuming information in a medium that's very interactive isn't the most intriguing way to perceive it. So you see many, both companies and advertisers and companies on the internet experimenting in identifying new ways of getting this communication packaged on the internet to allow both for this interaction as well as for a way to deliver commercial content in a way that it's being accepted instead of rejected.
So given this high degree of experimentation, okay, in terms of not finding a silver bullet, but at least working towards the silver bullet, what is JWT doing in the digital realm to account for, okay, the high degree of uncertainty, but also high opportunity? How are you developing your digital strategy?
There's two elements for us to that. One is the almost channel planning within a digital environment.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many different opportunities in the digital world that we need to understand which type of medium we can use for what objective. Secondly, the creative element. I mean, we're not a production company. We don't do the media buying, but we develop the creative idea for a brand or a product and tailor it to the use on the internet so people can interact with it. And I think that's the biggest challenge for our agency to be successful with creative ideas.
Okay, so one is understanding how consumers digest the internet and how they engage with the internet, and the other is much more creative in terms of what you might call idea amplification to make the idea that they might see on TV more powerful. What about CRM? What about digital CRM? I hear that word so often. All right, is it real yet, or is it still a promise of the latter 21st century?
CRM is still in its infancy. I mean, the amount of data available for companies to start building a relationship with the customer was very limited. Obviously, internet accelerated that a lot, but there's a lot expertise needed to start building processes that allow you to start interacting. I mean, my definition of CRM is not just send out a mailing once through the internet and hope you sell something.
What is it?
CRM is literally building a relationship with the client, understanding his needs, understanding his behavior, and then tailor an offering to him, which will be more interested than a generic offer that goes out to the most.
Okay, so let's back up a little bit more conceptually into brands in China. It's a new market.
Yeah.
It's a big market. What does that mean about the challenges of creating or building or strengthening brands in China that would be different from, say, what you experienced back in Europe?
The biggest difference is that relationship consumers have with brands in China is relatively weak. Obviously, there are differences per category, but most relationships are rooted into the functional benefits of a product. And that doesn't build a strong relationship. That only makes you buy the product that's the fastest or the cheapest or the highest or whatever the benefit is. The challenge therefore is building an emotional bond with these consumers without losing the functional benefits. So fusing the two is what in the short term needs to be done to move up the ladder a little bit
And
start
therefore
building
increase
brands.
prices and profit? I mean, is there a linkage between emotional affinity and price premiums that you can charge in China?
Clearly. I mean, the higher the bonding with the brand, the higher the premium people are willing to pay for that, because it says something about them, it helps them move forward in life.
Do you think that that's one reason, or am I misreading the situation, that most international brands are charging a much higher premium? Is it because of the quality or the relationship that consumers have with these international brands? Like, for example, all the mobile phones are international brands. Nokia has 40% of the market, I've seen, even in tier 3 and 4 cities, and local brands are not that prevalent. And yet, for some reason, in the house, you have local brands that are so dominant. What's going on there?
Consumers are looking for one thing, mainly, and that's trust. Not every product can be trusted in terms of quality. Therefore, people tend to look at foreign companies because they can be trusted, because they have proven themselves already. For that, they are willing to pay a premium in terms of quality. That premium is not very big. But the second thing you are mentioning is that consumers are willing to pay for product that can be consumed in public. So a mobile phone, a product which you show all the time moving around China, is something that can enhance your status and show that you're successful. compared to products that you consume at home, which nobody can see.
I see. Let's move a little bit from the advertising landscape to management. Tell me about managing people in China, particularly in an advertising industry which is creativity driven. Is there or is there not a significant difference in how you have to approach your job as a managing director in the PRC?
There's a significant difference. I think that people, and I can only speak for advertising, but when I speak to friends and colleagues in other industries, they kind of reconfirm the same thing, is that people are inherently insecure about their own position. They are ambitious, they want to achieve a lot, but there's worry all the time. And that means that the kind of emotional management you need to do with these people is at a much higher level than it would be in a country, for example, where I grew up.
So what does that mean specifically in terms of how you get the job done well? What are the challenges and in terms of what the Chinese, to your experience, still have to develop in, and what do they do very well?
It needs a much closer and constant interaction throughout the whole process, rather than people taking something and developing it themselves till the end.
Have you made any progress with your team in terms of this proactivity, right? Or do you feel like no matter what, you're going to have to be micromanaging from beginning to end?
I certainly feel that I've made progress, but it's naive to think that we can completely distract from that process. It's something that needs to be reinforced constantly, it's something that needs to be guided constantly, and we need to monitor that to make sure that things are on the right track.
What about somehow management structure that facilitates or optimizes the degree of proactivity or creative initiative or self-expression, however you want to put it? Is there anything that a management team can do to structure the type of culture that is reinforcing the type of behavior that's required to build brands and to push ideas? There's three critical things for me. It's about education, helping and teaching and learning them as much as possible about the opportunities that are out there. We can do that by knowledge, obviously, that's within the company, but often we work with specialists outside who tell about a certain expertise. Stimulation, as I said before. I think constantly we need to stimulate people to use this and experience with it. And thirdly, it's building successful cases, best practices, which we can learn and educate our people about. Because what I strongly believe in, that if you build these campaigns across the different disciplines with the right specialists in the right way, it contributes to the business success of our clients. And once we are in that area and seen as a partner from that at that level, I think the people in our agency do want to be an advisor of that caliber. Let's just an excellent question. Let's go back to diversification and talk about it a little bit more generally. Can you please explain JWT's diversification strategy and whether or not it's unique in the market or whether it's just more of the same? Everybody's talking about diversification. What's your strategy?
I think in the world there are two schools of thought. One is to build all the expertise within one company under one roof, a supermarket where you can buy everything. The other school is using specialists in each area, tapping into their expertise and offering an integrated solution through their knowledge. We obviously we believe in the second model.
Why?
Because it is quick. You don't need to build it all yourself. You can use specialists that have proven themselves in their categories. And the third thing for me is that it moves a bit away from the discussion that advertising agencies are expensive. So even if you buy other services that are offered at a lower price level, it might be perceived as expensive.
I see.
The disadvantage is that's a model that it's more difficult to get across.
Well, be a little bit more specific in terms of what type of companies, if you're going for this external model, what type of companies you're working with and how you work with them. Not in terms of facilitating collaboration, we can talk about that later, but what, have you acquired them? Are they strategic alliances? What? Who are you working with?
There's three models. There's buying a company, there's having a minority share, or having a strategic alliance. All obviously intended to have a long-term relationship with them that's facilitated by such a partnership.
But can you quickly tick through the types of companies that you have in your in your JWT group? I mean, what type of companies have you had as your first priority? Which companies specifically?
Always.
What is that?
That's a field marketing agency with over 10,000 employees supporting brands in store throughout the whole of China. It's unique that they have a national span. Besides that, they have a couple of services on top of this network, which are hugely interesting for companies to monitor their business performance and benchmark it against competitors. We work closely, obviously, with RMG Connect, which is now 100% part of JWT, which is a CRM company, which we discussed before. We work very closely with Identica, which is a brand identity, a rooted in design expertise company. We work with Insight PR, which is a PR firm specialized in marketing PR, rooted in media contacts, with offices in Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangzhou in the south.
And how do you get these people to work together? I mean, you've got bosses of different companies. I mean, how in heaven's name can you get these experienced people who think that they're the best in the industry to collaborate? I mean, that seems like a very difficult operational challenge.
Correct. What helps us a lot is that we have a strategic and creative framework which we call engagement planning. That means, in short, that you boil down the essence of the strategy into a brand vision, and you bring the brand vision to life with what we call engagement idea. And these two elements are always the starting point for a discussion with the partner agency.
Okay, so you're not going there theoretically, you're going there with specific brand projects and creative projects that makes it much easier to link in with the different expertise.
Obviously, I mean, this is the way of working that allows us to make sure everything's truly integrated, because it's rooted into the brand strategy and it's rooted into a central creative platform.
What about fighting over money for clients' revenue? I mean, do you ever have a problem with that? You know, where people are grabbing, say the PR people want the advertising budget and the advertising people want the PR budget, or do you not have those conflicts?
Well, when you're having a share in a company that's part of the group, this is not an issue anymore.
I see. Final question is the economic crisis. How bad is it?
I don't know if it's naive or if it's cautiously optimistic.
But you're Dutch, and Dutch are not known for
very confident.
You're very confident? Really? I mean, I've heard that multinational clients in particular are really, really cutting their budgets in China. True or false?
They are cutting. I think the amount of cuts happening here are relatively low compared to the rest of the world. Many international companies are still in a almost pioneering phase in getting certain things done in China. Lowering those investments or pulling out now would be probably the wrong decision. Obviously, they need to be conscious of what they're doing and making the right decisions. But one of the things I like about the word crisis in Chinese, that one of the characters says opportunity. And I think it will be a tough year. I can't look ahead too far. But it will force you to focus, and it will force you to make tough decisions. And I think in the end everybody will come out stronger if you do it.
Have you noticed that that's a very noble rallying cry, but have you noticed that local clients are cutting back more or less than international clients, or have you observed any sectors which are being more impacted negatively or even possibly positively by the crisis?
I think from a positive point of view, I think the luxury sector will keep its investment at a certain level. If you lose part of your money, but you already have quite a lot, then you will keep spending money on luxury products. What you'll see is that, as you said before, the in-house consumption of products, people might trade down on that in terms of quality and investment.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Michiel Hofstee, the Managing Director of JWT Shanghai. I'm Tom Doctoroff for iTV-Asia, the Advertising and Marketing channel. Hope to see you next time. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you, Tom.
You're welcome.